Okay, cool. So we're good to go. Now, what we're going to be talking about this week is, and welcome, let me see who else we got here. Weed, and, okay, cool. So, and then again, guys, we're definitely going to have an opportunity for questions as well to be asked. Usually we do that in between topics or in between topic points. And then we'll also be doing that at the very end where we kind of do a big open floor Q&A where players can ask anything and everything. Usually we'll try and stay on topic with the topical questions. So let me just start off with what our outline is going to be. You can also look at that in the announcements channel. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about week 4. This is the late game, kind of around that 90-day to 90-day plus. And we're going to be talking about a few things. So we'll be talking about migration has opened, and I think maybe the voice channel chat is good to go. Awesome, so it is. So we do have that going, so anyone can go ahead and type it there. There we go, Pockers. All right, so our outline for today, as I said, week 4 of the late game, 90 plus days. We're going to be talking about how to keep your server active, right? What are some pros and cons, some areas that goes into that, right? In order for you to have a good chance of making it to 90 days and then 90-day plus. Migration has opened, right? What are some of the pros and cons of migration opening? We'll talk about some ways that you can prep for migration. How are you going to be able to tell if your server is doing well at day 90? We'll touch a little bit on AVA. We'll talk a little bit about SVS. And then we'll also talk about maybe some rumored later Kingdom content. So this is going to be somewhat of an interesting show as well, because we might give away some breadcrumbs. We'll also talk about working on player retention, how important that is for when you make it to day 90. We'll also touch a little bit on the mindset of players, because typically this is really where some of that early fatigue could set in, where it's really important to be doing certain things, so that way you are putting your players in your server in the best possible position you can. And it's also probably going to be us talking about some of the things that you as a player may have experienced before in other Kingdom Builders if you've played in a Kingdom Murder server for a long time, but we'll talk about what some of those things would be in Infinity Kingdom as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to start talking about you're coming up on day 90, and what are some of the things, right, some of the big things that you're looking forward to when it comes to migration opening up. And then after this, we'll touch a little bit on the AVA and SVS format, but I want to talk about this first because there's going to be a lot that we'll talk from there. But migrations is a really important starting topic because we're going to be able to wrap around and connect some dots by starting here. So, again, week 3, we talked a little bit about leading up to migration and a little bit of some areas that you would want to focus on. Now, the reason why I really think migration is the next big milestone for your server is for a few reasons. One, how you prepare for migration is vitally important. For anyone here, and just out of curiosity, right, for the people that are here so far, again, we are going to be allowing for questions to be answered. Just so you know, if you're a visitor or a non-member, you're more than welcome to ask your question in voice channel chat, but just with respect, we just won't call on you for some obvious reasons. But you're more than welcome to ask that in the voice channel chat. We're happy to answer as well. If you're just tuning in or you're visiting, again, this is Infinity Kingdom. It's a mobile MMO strategy kingdom builder with a lot of potential if you've played other games as well. And these are some of these unique host weekly shows that we do on the server that's also promoted and assisted by the IK team, which is really awesome. It's something I haven't really seen any other mobile kingdom builder do on their official Discord, which I just think is absolutely phenomenal. Now, with that being said, just out of curiosity, I'd love to get a show of hands. First off, has anyone here in the call so far, have you played another kingdom builder prior to IK? Just a quick show of hands. If you're someone who's played a kingdom builder prior to playing IK, just curious on how many we have. Okay, awesome. So, okay, definitely a decent amount. So it looks like about a third, if not a little over. Okay. So my next question then before we finish or get into the full point here is how many of you have migrated out of your starting server to another server? And if you've played a Kingdom Builder, how many of you have actually migrated out of your server and gone into another server? And I'm not talking about jumping. I'm talking about you with your main account having to buy teleports or space teleports, right? Whether that's paying money or farming them with alliance credits in some way, shape, or form. How many of you have actually migrated out of a kingdom or server? Okay. Okay, so literally just a few. Okay. So if anything, that it's going to be a little more important for me to kind of touch on and talk about this because, again, if you're someone who's played Kingdom Builders, you know that most of the time, especially in the beginning of a server's lifespan, you're typically having to spend money on whether it be New World bundles. This is a pretty common bundle name that you'll hear across Kingdom Builders that you usually have to pay money for. Now, how it works in Infinity Kingdom is that you can purchase space teleports, but you have to be Alliance level 9. Now, the average amount of time it takes to hit Alliance level 9 before you can then start using your Alliance credits that you will get from upgrading cities, which is usually the primary way, and then of course when you're donating and you're just, anytime you're donating to tech, which obviously factors into you getting, and then of course your Alliance daily missions as well. So the main ones there really are tech donations, and then of course upgrading your cities because you get construction coins from that or Alliance credits from those. But you have to wait, I want to say on average around 5 to 6 months depending on the activity of your Alliance, and that's with you probably having near full activity that you're going to have to wait before your Alliance level will most likely hit 9 in order to then actually be able to purchase the space teleports, which then cost you 20k credits. So right, it's really kind of a culmination because you either have to be preparing early on and saving Alliance credits and not using them. Some people will save them for once they can get Yoshi. Some people like to get Yoshi shards from the Alliance shop once you get to that higher Alliance level. There's also some of the higher level, the higher hour cooldowns or the speed ups that you can get there as well. Territorial teleports, right? There are some pretty useful items there, but for the most part, if you want to migrate out of a server into another, you usually have to purchase space teleports, and most of those are going to be coming from New World bundles that you'll have to pay money for prior to your Alliance hitting level 9. So the reason why migration is really important for your server is one, because of the value that players have to invest in order to migrate. Right now, sure, you might go on the official Infinity Kingdom Discord like we are now, and you may go over to the recruitment channels where you'll see Alliance recruitment, you'll see server or jumper recruitment, and you'll see servers that are posting their ads, or you'll see recruiters that are posting their ads for their server or even for their specific Alliance within that server. Now, when you are migrating, the important thing, and I'm only going to briefly touch on this because we'll probably dive into it more in maybe a specific topical session that we might actually start doing after these. But usually you want to always do your due diligence. It's very important that you take time to vet kingdoms or servers that you are potentially considering going to. Now, most players, in my experience, usually will just go off of a Kingdom ad or an Alliance ad, and they'll think that that sums up everything they're going into. Now, of course, we should hope that people that are posting ads with the lines they're putting in them, the content they're putting in them, are being truthful and accurate. But it's always good to do your due diligence. The easiest way to do that is you just make an account in that server that they're promoting, right? You ask the recruiter some questions to see if, in case there's any follow-up that you have based on the information that's posted in those ads. You make an account there, and you just message the leaders, the officers, and maybe some players, and you just ask them, hey, is this really how your server is? Right? Super simple. And you can use the ads that people post as your guideline, right, to go off of, and then based on the conversations you have with the recruiters. But it's always good to do your due diligence. Now, that's only in situations, now I always feel you should do this as a baseline, but if you have a situation, for example, like let's say you're getting a lot of information from a specific server because maybe you have a contact there, you have a friend there, and they're giving you information, or if you're able to get information on a server from a content creator. One example would be, again, if you go on my channel, you'll see that we have more or less pretty consistently posted updates on server 36. So you can see how things are going. We'll show you examples and things like that. Other content creators, I'm sure, have done the same, right? So if you have those aids, then that's a little bit more helpful. But if you don't, then you should always take time to do your due diligence in that regard. Now, how can migration affect you and your server that you're in? This is why, and this kind of gets a little bit into the server management portion, is the reason why it's so important to really value and take time when it comes to your incoming traffic that can come into the server, right? And for most, I would assume a good amount of people here, if not some at least, are familiar that, right, you can have a couple different migration settings for the cap that you can list it at. And to show, let me see here if I can just show a quick example. If I just zoom out of my game here, I'm going to grab a screenshot just so I can show a visual of how the World Heart migration works when you have access to the King option. So I think it's Kingdom Quest is what it is. So let me grab a screenshot real quick. So there's migration conditions that you get access to when you are king or queen. And I'm also going to post this in the voice welcome chat. So, and I'll definitely be going off of the voice channel chat and catching up. So again, feel free, right? If you'd like to post questions, whether it's on any of the topics we're talking about, you're more than welcome to type those in the voice channel chat, and we'll read those out as we go through. But we also like to give players an opportunity to voice questions in addition to texting, just because we do realize that not everyone is probably in the same situation where they're able to text and or voice for where they're at. Now, if you look at the screenshot I just posted in the voice channel chat, you'll see that every kingdom has migration options. Now, this is a fantastic feature, and I'm really surprised that IK put this in as early as they did, but happy at the same time. Now, the reason why migration is really important to consider is for really a few reasons. One, if you just, let's say you go with a no cap or a no limit cap, and that would essentially mean at this point that players at 2 mil or under, at least from what we've got confirmed so far, I'm still waiting to find out if players over 2 mil can migrate to servers. But we're just going to operate under the assumption for now that if you're 2 mil or under, and keep in mind that migration is based on peak. It's not based on your current power, right? So here's an example. If you've hit 1 mil power, and this is really only for the top end, right? So let me just give the 2 mil example. So before they increased the cap, when it was 1 mil, if you hit 1 mil power, you could not migrate. You were locked in the server you were in. After the migration update, they changed it. So now I want to say the cap is 2 mil, but we're just waiting to get a hard confirmation of that, just because of the fact that there is a no limit migration option in the screenshot I posted, which could supersede that. So the soft assumption would be that, let's say they increased it to 2 mil. That would mean that if you hit 2 mil, you're locked in your server. You cannot migrate out. And it's based on peak. So even if you hit 2 mil and you break down an immortal, for example, and it puts you under 2 mil where you're 1.95 or something like that as an example, right? You're still locked into your server. So just keep that in mind, a little food for thought. Now, the reason why migration outside of that point is extremely important is because it can change the entire dynamic of your server. There's a few things, and let me start with the biggest, which is that when migration opens, it's really important for the king or queen to set a migration cap that is appropriate for what your expectation is coming in, along with the amount of power you can handle. This is another extremely big point to really consider. And again, if you're a player, I'm going to talk about as well how this could affect you. This is why it's important for whoever is, the controlling alliance for World Heart, or whoever the alliance is that wins your CORs, right? Whether it's an organized group or if it's just a rogue alliance, these are things to really take into mind because it can affect your gaming experience in the long run. Now, what are some of these things? Now, let's say your controlling group or the alliance that controls World Heart decides that they want to set the cap at whatever they want. That means that you could potentially have some players coming in that are over 1 mil, and if you don't have enough people in your server over 1 mil, that might make it somewhat challenging. In addition to, if your let's say your server isn't organized. Migration can be something that just throws your server potentially over the edge. Right? There's a couple servers I've seen groups that have migrated into already, just in the short time that IK has been up, where they went in as like a fighting PvP alliance, and they just wanted to go in there just to basically cause havoc, right? Because again, you migrate, you wait 30 days, you can migrate again. So right, they're kind of, I don't know if they're approaching it with like an honor farming mentality, where they just want to go in, attack anyone and everyone, farm some honor, and then migrate out, so they can, so they can just have the majority of their players boost account too. Right, again, there's a couple strategies that could be employed depending on how aggressive you want to be, even though there is the month cooldown. Though that's why it is important to figure out, one, what your player base is in your server, and more importantly, what can your server handle based on the cap you're setting. And then, who's going out and doing your recruitment? Who's going out and doing your migration control, right? Who is your migration rep for your server? Do you even have a rep? Do you even know what a migration rep is, right? These are things that are important to take a look at, so that way your server can be more prepared for when migration comes up, and even prior to that. Most professionally organized and ran servers or kingdoms, typically in these types of games, usually will already be preparing for migration, maybe somewhere around day 45, day 60, right, where they'll really start considering going out there and recruiting, right, getting their kind of ducks in a row, doing things like preparing shells ahead of time. I mean, there's a lot that really goes into migration if you want to dissect it, because keep in mind, you can revitalize a server through migration. You can have a server that has 500 active people, and you bring in 2 to 3 to 400 players after migration opens, right, just from lining it up. And you can do that in a short period of time. You could do more than that in a longer period of time. The example I give is that in my time playing another Kingdom Builder, I had, just across typical recruiting seasons between KVKs, were usually about 2.5 to 3 months. Now, I ran the recruiting department for the top server, top kingdom that I was in. And that was from me working my way up. But when I was running that department as the lead recruiter, I ended up bringing in probably, 150 people in half of a recruiting season, which totaled up to about 5 to 550 million power. Now, again, the power scaling is different in the other game that I played, but the important part here is that if you recruit well, it can be something that truly saves your server or revitalizes your kingdom or server, which is important, especially if you are losing activity. Now, let's say your server is active. And keep in mind, that's why we talk a lot about player retention. If you're able to retain a high amount of players up until day 90, all you're doing is just adding on, right? It's just more icing on the cake, especially if you're able to bring in a lot of power, and more importantly, players and or groups that are really wanting to join your server because they like your structure, they want to be a part of what you're offering. Now, how can this affect you as a player? So for you as a player, migration can affect you in a few ways. If you bring in a rogue group, or, any rogue alliance, rogue players join, that could potentially affect your playing experience. That can have unintended consequences for how, or ramifications better yet, for what may happen in the future. One example could be, let's say that now during the kill events, you have rogue players or groups that are just going hard all the time. They're just attacking anyone and everyone. And let's just say you, as a player, end up in someone's crosshairs just by happenstance, right? Where maybe prior to that you weren't attacked before. That could have a negative impact on your playing experience, where let's say you're in a server that has that. Now, of course, there's other factors that go into this, but then let's also add this on and say that maybe this alliance ends up pushing really hard in COR, and they're then going to be the next king or the next queen of the server. They could open the cap up and bring in whoever they want potentially, right? And now you're kind of gonna now you could be put into a situation where now your server is getting overthrown because the rogue group or alliance that came in now takes over king or queen, and then all of a sudden now they are the ones controlling migration, and they're able to then bring in their friends. Now, for some players here, if you've played other kingdom builders, you might be familiar with this, where in a previous kingdom builder I played, this was a pretty viable strategy that you would have not a large, it wouldn't happen all the time, but you would hear about it happening, where you would have a group of whales or rogue high spenders, right, that would go into a kingdom and they would start up an alliance, they'd bring players in, they'd be friendly, and they would just go for a king at their first opportunity, and they would time it out with other groups or players that wanted to come, where they would open the cap up and bring these people in, and now they're basically running the kingdom or server. Now, I don't think that has the highest chance of working out in IK just because of some of the current restrictions that are put in place. Now, the one thing I will say is that I would love for them to add on something where they lower the migration cap. Though I like it at 1 mil, I really think they need to give you two other options. I think they need to give you a 500k option and a 750k option, in my opinion, because it would really just allow for servers to have a little bit more control about who they let in, and then more importantly when they let those players in as well, so they can have a little bit more safe, so their server can be a little more safeguarded, especially if you're in a server where you built something really well. So again, that's some points about, one, how migration can affect you as a player, why you should take migration seriously, why you should even ask your leadership or alliances that have king about how they're going to do it, because all of these things at the end of the day come full circle back around to each individual player on how it could and potentially affect your gaming experience in that server. Alrighty, let me go ahead, and if anyone has any questions there, I'm also going to read through voice channel chat before we move on to the next topic. Let me see if anyone has a hand up. Let's see here. All right, so just a friendly reminder, if you're a visitor, non-member, happy to have you. If you're a new member, whether that be visitor or new member, I would just like to ask for you to ask your question in voice channel chat. We're just not going to take any new members or visitors over voice, just for respectable reasons. But if you show up again next week or whenever we do another show and you're no longer just a new member, then you're more than welcome to come on voice. But just for now, if you wouldn't mind asking your question in voice channel chat, I would be happy to answer it. And let me go ahead and take a look here at the voice channel chat now and see if there are any questions specifically in regards to the migration topic that I just touched on, whether it be for what you can look forward to or for what you might experience as a player. Let's see. Voice channel chat is popping today. Super active. Just scrolling up a little bit. Let's see. Okay, let me scroll down now so I can catch up, see if any questions were asked, and then I'll check back in on the audio portion. Cool. There's Perry. Yeah, I know we always used to like to. I know we always like to try and have a mod on standby. Thankfully, Perry's there. Let's see here. All right. So let me go ahead and come back to see if anyone has a hand up that has a question on migration. All right. Okay. So it doesn't look like any questions were asked in voice channel chat, nor on the request to speak from current members. So let me go ahead and we'll move on to the next. We'll move on to the next topic. So again, after just touching on migration there, we're now going to go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit about the how to gauge if your server is doing well at around day 90. So with now where you're coming up to, right, again, you're probably getting close to migration, if not migration is already opened. How can you tell if your server is doing well around day 90? And let me just ask this to the people that are here, right? Whether you want to raise your hand and take a stab at this, or if you want to try to answer in voice channel chat. What do you think are some things that would indicate your server is healthy and doing well at day 90 or coming up to day 90. Just for anyone that wants to take a guess, whether you want to type that in voice channel chat, if you want to raise your hand, again, if you're a current member or an existing member, what do you think are some things that would indicate your server is doing well or has potential to continue on by the time you get to day 90, and even more so past that? Okay, so Joshi says a well set up Discord with all major alliances involved. Okay. I do think that that is a good point and definitely a good one as well. Let me see. I think a few other people are typing. One moment. Alrighty. I can't type. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Alright, let's see here if there was anything else that someone had answered with. Ember says, I think multiple alliances that are able to compete with each other on the same power level, so it's not one alliance dominating everyone else. Alright, no, I do like that answer as well. You know, regardless, that's an honor. So, yeah, no, I think a few of those. Let me see if... Okay, Made You Cry had requested to speak. Let's see if Cry wants to add something. Welcome, Cry.
Bro, how do you get purple gems, bro? The Tower of Knowledge is sucking my purple gems. I have 40k. 5 minutes later, I don't have any.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, we'll definitely answer that as well. Probably more so after we finish the topics and then we get to the end. But if you have to leave before that, just make sure you type that in the voice channel chat, and then we'll definitely answer that for you, Craig. So I think a few good points there that were brought up in regards to what are some indicators that would tell you that you are setting your server up well, right, for success by the time you get there. Things that are going to factor into your whether or not your server is doing well and how it looks publicly and visually to other players that could consider coming, or for how people that are currently in your server may feel about it. So again, some of those that others have mentioned in the voice channel chat, which is how we're going to organize in a structured Discord. I think that is vitally important if you are getting into a new server where you are trying to communicate or convey information or even just disseminate information in a more organized way, right? Discord, it just has a lot of opportunities that you can utilize this platform over or in addition to the in-game. But keep in mind, in-game is still somewhat limited because even in in-game, you can really only rely on, world chat, kingdom chat, alliance mails, if you want to DM each player in your alliance personally. If you want to try and rely also on server mail, which server mail is still nice, even though you're limited to 300 characters, and there's really not a way that you can properly format it for the most part. Which, again, hoping that that will be an improvement on server mail, because I think server mail is by far the most important. I mean, if you're able to retain... most servers on average usually get about 40 to 50k new players that join a new server over a 3-day period, which is the average new server opening window that you'll get in Infinity Kingdom. Because of this, that is why we talk a lot about how vitally important it is to retain as much of that player base as possible that is still playing in your server, right? Because once a new server opens, they're going to get all of the new incoming traffic or new players that are making new accounts or just downloading the game to try it out. And that is those new players, right? Keep in mind, 95, at minimum, 95% of all players, if not, I would probably argue 98 to 99%, of all players in a server, in a new server, are brand new to the game. Now, whether they're brand new to Kingdom Builders or they're just brand new to Infinity Kingdom, that has to be the assumption. And the reason I say that is because we cannot anticipate what a player knows about Infinity Kingdom, and then also we can't anticipate what someone would know about Kingdom Builders in general. Which is why we always have to apply some extra TLC when it comes to giving players a good gaming experience. One, so they can get used to the game and adjust to it, and then two, so they can get more information, hopefully be well informed, so they, one, kind of know what they're walking into and know what they can do in the game as well. That will hopefully improve their overall gaming experience, right? Information is key always. And the more time you as an alliance lead or as an officer take to educate and just give good information, the higher chance not only your efforts but every other alliance lead's efforts is going to be combined when it comes to just factoring overall into how many players will stay in your server after the new one comes out, and then all of that incoming traffic, for the most part, right, is also cut off. Which is why, again, it all comes back to how can you tell if your server's doing well, right? I would say another indication is if you have alliances that are close in power on the leaderboards, right? Going maybe down to top 20, top 30. If you have close power ranges between alliances, this is another great indication that you can see and tell that you have, one, good activity in your server, but you also have good alliance activity. You can also tell this based on how quickly alliances are raising their alliance level, right? This is another great way. That is probably more of a pure way to indicate activity based on how quickly alliances are each hitting that new or the next alliance level, outside of how you might gauge the power gap between alliances that are in your server at certain points. Another thing that I would say is a good thing to do for those of you spreadsheet individuals or passionate data gatherers would be if you track. So we had, as an example, in S36, we had a couple players that would track specific pieces of data for us. One of those pieces of data is they would track top players' power growths every couple days. They would also track alliance power growth on a daily basis. So they would just go through the top 25, top 30 alliances, and it just every day at reset, as an example, they would just write down what the power level was, just to see what the average growth for each alliance was as well. This is another great way that you can take a little bit more of a proactive approach to get a more accurate gauge on how well your alliances are progressing activity-wise, and that information can be used actually in a lot of ways. One example of how that information can be used is whether or not you can identify a potential alliance to maybe merge with or merge them into another alliance. Outside of there being a few other ways that you can utilize that information. But again, it all comes right back around to these are things you can do and indications you have, along with what I feel is a really important one, is trying to keep the power gap pretty close amongst the top alliances. This is very easy to do if you have an organized group going into a server, right? AKA if you're doing a jumper, or if you're just able to reach out to the leads in the beginning of when a new server opens and then try and get everyone on the same page that way. Outside of that, because you're keeping the gap close, it also allows a few really great options for you in the server you're in, which really is that you're able to have healthy and more so close competitions when it comes to server-wide events. This is something that is going to constantly boost activity and boost engagement. If you have 10 active alliances in your top 10 that are all close in power, and any 10 of them can win a server-wide event at any point in time, that is going to allow for you to have healthy competition. Why? Because players will start to feel as though their personal investment into an event that factors into their overall alliance ranking in that event is now more meaningful. Instead of them looking at the alliance power rankings on your leaderboard saying, well, the number 1 and number 2 alliance are like 5 to 10 million power ahead of us. How are, and then also if you're in a server that is like that, where you notice that 1 or 2 alliances are always winning events constantly, that can also be a turnoff because some players will look at that. Maybe not everyone, but some players will look at which alliances win events. They will also look at how your alliance they're in places, and that will factor into whether or not they stay in your alliance or they leave to join another alliance that is constantly winning events, or if they decide to maybe the server isn't for me because there's 1 or 2 alliances that always win. Maybe they're not strong enough to join a higher ranked alliance. I mean, it could be for a multitude of reasons. But these are why it's good to really understand what I feel is the player psychology that factors into a lot of these things on why players do certain things that they do in-game. So that way, leads or project managers can have better and more information to go off of so that 1, they can be more well-informed, and then 2, hopefully they'll be able to make good decisions going forward for the health of their server. Alrighty, I think that covers point number 2, which is how to know if your server is doing well at day 90. Does anyone have any questions in regards to that? And again, if you'd like to raise your hand for that, if you're a current or existing member, you're more than welcome to, if you have a question on that, or if you want to type that in the voice channel chat, you're more than welcome to, and I'm just going to go through that right now. Barry's like just deleting his stuff. Yeah, Cry. So I'll definitely answer your question now with the excuse me, the fire squad gash. So for the purple gems, just to get that question off, is you could do human rebels. So anytime the rebels event comes up, you can summon those in groups. That's a great way to boost getting a lot of purple gems. Something that we would have loved to try and do in the server that we were in. To organize prior, but usually what you do is you hunt gnomes, you get as many as you can, then once the event ends, you organize clusters or hives, and then you'll just have people constantly you can have 5 or 6 or 7 rebel rallies going on at the same time, and honestly, rebel rallies are probably the single best way to hoard, just like double rewards. Like the double rewards event is by far the best event to invest your AP into, as far as for leveling up your immortals in your marches. The rebel rallies event is by far the best event to really get a consistent amount of purple gems instead of just constantly waiting for 9 times pulls from your Hall of Immortals, or waiting to dismantle any of the free summons that you get from shards, or even dismantling any that you get from the immortal shards from Mysterium as well. So yeah, Rebel Rally definitely is the best one to do for there. Of course, you'll get them from Harble, you'll get them from Mysterium, you'll get them from the Rebel Rallies, and then of course if there's any seasonal events that come up where you can also get immortal shards as well. But I would say Rebels event is probably the best one to actually invest AP into. Alright, let me see if there's anything else. Change your faction. Bleep bleep. let me see. Joshy says I think 10 alliances is unrealistic. What do you mean, Joshy? Sorry, you mean having 10 like balanced alliances, as in the top 10? Is that what you mean on the comment I made? Ten balanced. Okay. Why do you think it's unrealistic? Okay. Okay. People like to flock to stronger alliances. Okay. Okay. So people like not enough space for 10 strong allies as well. Okay. Okay. So some looks like a different side of the fence on that comment there. So what I will say about that is, and again, this just comes from my experience in managing projects and servers and kingdoms for the time that I've been playing Kingdom Builders, has more or less been for about 5 years now. Though I didn't start off doing server management or kingdom management initially, I actually had to work my way up from just being a regular member, and had a fantastic upbringing in the previous kingdom builder that I played. What I will say is that, one, it is easier than you might think to balance out the top set of alliances. A good example of this is, oh, excuse me if you can hear my nose blowing, totally forgot to mute. If you look at example, again, I wouldn't say now, but if you did look when our group first landed in S36, there was a video I put out covering this exact topic, where you ended up seeing, I want to say it was the top eight or top 10 alliances, because I know at the time we still had 8 by the time I had put out that last video, where we were able to still have fantastic balance in how low the power gap was. So trust me when I say it is very doable, but it has to be done with an organized group, right? You have to set a standard and a precedent when you get into a server. It is more difficult to do that when you just go in with, let's say, one alliance or a few players, and every alliance lead is kind of just for themselves, right, so to speak, or they didn't come in with a united front. Then yes, in those cases it's going to be extremely difficult, because you're going to have to basically sell people on an idea when they're just hearing everything for the first time. Now, where it becomes a little easier is if you have a big jumper group with, let's say, 6 to 10 to 12 alliances, however many it is. You can then apply those policies, right, in the way that you want to go about balancing the alliances, which hopefully will then have a ripple effect to the other alliances that are in the top as well. But you have to somewhat lead by example. If you're not doing it, then there's no incentive for anyone else to really do it at the same time. So I think when you look at, right, how, and keep in mind, right, players may think that it's not possible or it's difficult to do if it's something they've never tried before, or if they've never set themselves up in a position to where they have a higher chance of that succeeding or being implemented. Because keep in mind, it does take a lot of work. It's not an easy task to just immediately snap your fingers and poof, now all of a sudden we have 10 alliances that are within 100k power of each other, right? It does take some time. But if you can sell people on why it is a great thing to strive for and to do, just like we did, or better yet, I should say I did, but we, because it was a joint effort at the end of the day. But for me to sell people on it and to explain to the leads and to the officers and to our group that, and when we initially went to S36, why it would be beneficial, right? That is what got them on board. right, is because they understood the unity that it would bring, the benefit that it would bring for the server, what it would show publicly and visually to the server and to the other leads there as well. And, again, if it wasn't for the, the constant attacking, if it wasn't for the constant attacking, if it wasn't for, just the constant PvPing that was going on, and then, some of the defectors from S36 for anyone that saw my last video, right, then a lot of those things we would have effortlessly been able to implement, which we were already on the track to. So again, right, the foundation was there, and the initial implementation was there, and we were able to see how well even that worked going into the first couple weeks. But once again, if you're not a part of a group, and again, keep in mind it's a lot easier to do this when you are a part of a jumper group rather than not being and just going in as a few players or one alliance, then yes, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do. I completely agree with you there, which is why I think it's important that for people that are going into servers where they are able to apply some level of structure and organization because of the size of their group coming in, that is really going to be, at least what I believe, the best bet to being able to secure that. Sorry, Hardest asked, by the way, my jumper group is having to choose between 1 to 3 strong alliances per kingdom. We're already making sure kingdoms are balanced, but how many alliances per kingdom should we do? People are worried COR rotation might become too slow with 3 alliances per kingdom. Well, keep in mind, COR rotation, this is why it's good to have a good understanding of how the mechanic works and really what the true benefit is. COR rotation should not be going based off alliances. It should be going based off of factions, right? And that's mainly because the most important thing when it comes to how you would factor in a COR rotation is really off the gold. Who's king or queen is somewhat irrelevant because everyone can eventually get a turn. But the primary part to look at is the actual faction rotation itself, because gold is the most finite resource of the game, and the winning faction is the one that's going to have access to those special tiles. So that's really where you should be looking at it from when it comes to how to efficiently and effectively do a proper COR rotation. It doesn't matter how many alliances you have. Everyone over a period of time can easily get a turn if that's the way you have it set up. But what the selling point should be is off of faction, not off of alliance. Because no matter what, someone's going to have to go first, someone's going to have to go second and third, and it's just a matter of basically just coming up with a decision on that. But again, you're most likely going to do it a couple, it doesn't really matter how you start. You can start with blue, green, or red, right? And then you just have every faction get an equal turn. I mean, it's pretty easy. It's just the big thing to sell people on is the fact that you're allowing each faction, or you're better yet wanting each faction to have a proper turn when it comes to being able to farm those gold nodes from winning. And like I said, being king or not doesn't really... This is the thing to consider, and I don't want to touch on this too much because I could really expand deep on this, is that not everyone should want to be king, right? It is a nice thought, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? If you are not someone who, in my opinion, works or has worked in a customer service-like field, or in some kind of a support like field, or if you're someone who has not been a manager in real life, these are really proper qualities that are going to make your life much easier as a lead being king in a server or queen in a server. Because once you become king or queen, you are going to get a lot of messages. And if you are not prepared to answer those questions, that can also be a detriment to your server. If you're someone who takes over king and queen and you don't take time to answer questions, if you don't take time to send proper or efficient server mails out, that can be a downside to you becoming king or queen. You may not think people notice. People notice. It may not be every single person, but people notice. And they will look, if there's someone who messages you, and let's say they're a leader of a lower ranked alliance, or they're an officer in a higher ranked alliance, or they're a player in a higher ranked alliance answering questions, or asking questions, and let's say you don't respond. Do you think there's a high chance that they might just keep that to themselves? Maybe. Is there also a chance that they might go and start telling people? And then is there also a chance they might go and start telling people that in DMs rather than in public? right? And now you have this festering seed that has been planted because of that. That is why, I shouldn't even say that's why. Well, I guess I should probably, right? That's really why I also stress a lot about, right, not every single player should want to take on the position of king or queen, along with wanting to manage. Keep in mind, managing a server is completely different than managing an alliance, right? As an alliance, you are thinking about, hopefully, the players that you represent in your alliance. And you're also thinking about how your alliance's impact goes into the server, along with events, cities you're getting. When you're managing a server, you're thinking about, hopefully, an even playing field for every alliance in the server. How is this server going to benefit every player in the server? Right? The mindset is completely different. And most of the time, in my experience, what I usually find is that most players that, are just super high on wanting to be king or queen do not actually have a proper understanding for everything that goes into it and the amount of time that is required, as well as what the amount of responses and messages and almost, kind of example you have to lead by. Because when you're king or queen, your actions and your alliance's actions and your officers' actions and how they post in world chat, how they post in kingdom chat, all of that is really up for scrutiny, right? Think of it as you being under a magnifying glass. And again, keep in mind, not every single player is going to look at it like that, but you are going to have a good amount of players that will look at how you post. They'll look at how you post. And so, again, keep in mind that these things are really important if you are trying to set your server up for success. Which, again, is typically why you would want to make sure that you're trying to find, again, right, if you're running a jump group or something of the sort, you want to try and make sure that you're finding leads, or you're finding people that are, in a position where they can hopefully either have already pre-existing experience in being king or queen, or they're able to really efficiently kind of take on that job. So, anyways, let me scroll down a little bit more here. Look, you poor. Let me scroll down. You looking all right? Oh, thanks. I always be trying to be on my fleek status. Stack says, can I play the game without spending money? 100%. 100% if you want a free to play. Yeah, I actually think this game is a little bit more free to play friendly than other Kingdom Builders that I've played before. So, alrighty, cool. Let me see if anyone has a hand raise here. Okay. Snacks, not sure if you still wanted to ask a question, but I'll just call on you in voice if you'd like to ask something over voice as well. I know you asked in voice channel chat unless you want to unraise. Okay, cool.
Hello.
What's up, Snacks? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, I hear you good.
You answered already my question.
Oh, I did. Okay. No problem. No problem. Let me send you back to the audience then. Appreciate still asking. All right, cool. Coffee, Yoda, and IK. Couldn't ask for a better morning. Hey, awesome Skittles. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and let's move over to, let me see what we're looking at now for the next topic we're going to briefly touch on. I know I kind of went on a little side rant there to talk about King and Queen work, along with kind of how you're going to factor into a jumper group for some of the things you'll look at for some of those kind of late game policies. Let's see. We talked about migration opening with the pros and cons. We talked about, okay, so let's talk about a little bit. I'm going to touch a little bit on how to keep your server active. I know I've already kind of mentioned a couple things here that are semi-related, but I will go ahead and touch on a little bit more here. Okie dokie. All right, so now we're going to be touching on, as I mentioned, right, how to keep your server active. I'm just going to really touch on a couple points here for some of the bigger ones, and then again, if there are any questions related to those, then we'll go off. So, right, let me just kind of put the question out there first, right? What are some ways that, what are some things you can do in your new server from day one, and also things that you can do throughout your server up until day 90? If anyone wants to take a guess, what are some things you think you can do from the beginning of your server and throughout up until day 90 that could help keep your server as active as possible and increase player retention? And I'll just wait for some people to type in voice channel chat. Again, if you want to answer this over voice, again, anyone who's a current existing member, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. If you're a new member or visitor, again, you're more than happy to use the voice channel chat just to start with respect. Okay, so Joshi says, try to keep balance between whales and free-to-play. Okay. You mean balance as far as the spread between alliances? So we don't kind of get into like a mega alliance style structure? Is that where you're going with that? We see that, and if you have server rules, don't let people rushing T4, T5 bully free to play. Okay. Yeah. So no, I again, I definitely think that is, I definitely think those are more or less some good points as far as adding on to, you know, what are some things that you can do. I think with, and let me see real quick if anyone else has a hand raised. Okay. So I think with, you know, when it comes to how you're really going to factor in on, you know, server retention, even though, yes, I think you do not want, or hopefully you wouldn't want, players to be bullying anyone for that matter. And along with where you, along with other areas that you would be looking to factor into just overall server retention, I would say those things, in my opinion, are just a little bit smaller. Though I would say again, just still as equally to care about any and all ways that can factor into keeping player activity high, along with just having good or high player retention in your server, is that most of the time, again, keep in mind, right, this kind of circles all the way back around to what I was mentioning in the beginning of the show, which is that, right, 95 to arguably, you know, 98, 99%, which is probably more accurate, of players that join a server out of those 40, 50,000 plus players that on average load into every new server, you know, are more or less going to be new players. Whether it's new players to IK or if it's just new players to the genre, the assumption has to be that they more or less do not know everything that goes into, or at least enough that goes into their gaming experience on a server, and how that can be impacted in a few different ways. So in the end, right, it's good to always take time to explain these things to players, so that way they will have a better overall understanding of, one, how, you know, what the game is, how much can they really get out of it and enjoy, and then you're also taking time to explain to players in the form of best practices or tips, right? Again, kind of going back to that information dissemination when you're sending out either alliance mails or you're doing server mails, right? In addition to also having somewhat of a rapid response team, if you will, that can address any potential rogue players or alliances early that may impact other players' gaming experiences because they're just getting unnecessarily attacked. So I really think it's a healthy combination of the two, where you are, again, right, you're sharing with the server based on active alliances, so that way, because keep in mind that's also another reason that you would lose players is if it's just a couple alliances that are doing nothing but just capturing all the top cities. They're not letting other alliances have anything else, more or less, and then it just becomes an extremely top-heavy like server, right? You want, especially early on, you want to share as much as you can. I mean, keep in mind if you have, let me see real quick what I have here, because I know I wrote this out, I think yesterday, which is that there is 30. So there's 33 Zone 1, 33 Zone 1 RSS or RSS Zone 1 cities. Right? So in the RSS Zone 1 territories, there's 31 cities, and 33 cities. And keep in mind, if you're able to have 33 alliances capture a city that's in an RSS Zone 1 area, compared to if you have, if you just go off of the level 1 cities, which is, I think there's 21 or 23 level 1 cities. If you just went off of that, and you didn't try to spread it out as much as you could, keep in mind, because you're giving alliances a city, because you're giving, let me start rephrase, because you're giving more alliances a city, you're now allowing for a larger pool of players to experience more of what the game offers, right? Now keep in mind, there's a limited amount of cities. There's 81 cities total in a server. So you are not going to be able, right? If you had 100 active alliances, you're not going to be able to appease everyone, right, at the end of the day. So you have to come in with some realistic expectations. But what you can do is do everything possible to make sure that you are providing your alliances with at least as many opportunities to keep them for as long as you can. And the longer you're able to retain a higher amount of players within your server, it gives you more opportunities to then, at a more mid-game point, do things like merging and condensing, because you have a higher amount of players. So instead of you saying, okay, well, we're just going to have 10 alliances cap the cities, you'll probably end up merging somewhere to, 5 to 6. It's usually about half, give or take, once you get to end game is the average. So if I have 33 cities in the beginning that I'm sharing with, that's 16 to 17 alliances that I'm going to have an opportunity to condense to by the time we get to mid-game, and then maybe coming up to late game that might shrink a little bit more, compared to if I just have 10 to 15 alliances, I'm probably going to shrink down even less than that. Now, what are those actual implications? Well, that might get into the next topic, which is us kind of talking about things like SVS, AVA, right? Some of the rumored endgame content that we've heard some people throwing ideas out around, is that it will allow for you to be in a better position when you come up to SVS. SVS is by far the most important game mode in these types of games. And it is also the most fun, because it includes every active player that wants to participate in your server when you can go out and fight other servers. That is fun. And it is by far, in my opinion, again, the most fun that players and alliances will get out of these types of games. It is just an absolutely fantastic game mode and just feature that, again, is in development and hopefully will be coming out sooner than later, is always the hope. So anyways, that kind of wraps up that topic. Does anyone have any questions in regards to what I just talked about, or the topic that we're just currently on, which, again, is just talking about player retention? Then we're going to move over to AVA SVS, some later Kingdom content, and then we will wrap things up with the mindset of players to kind of have going in, and then how that might develop and further going into the late game. Let me see if anyone has a hand raised here. All right. Awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So looks like we're probably okay to move on to the next topic then. So the next one we're going to talk about is going to be SVS. We'll talk a little bit about AVA, and then we'll also talk a little bit about some rumored endgame content. So let me start off first with AVA, because this is typically what's going to happen first. And mainly just because it has already been announced in the form of Illusion Battlefield. So the reason why I think AVA is really important for servers to participate in is because it's most likely going to give you somewhat of a real-time indication on, again, in some areas, on how SVS could potentially play out, right? Where, let's say a zone has opened up or something has opened up where you can then start relocating or using territorial TPs to get to maybe certain structures or objectives in SVS, right? In that form, AVA will have a similar style. Now keep in mind, in SVS, usually they're not offering you the types of special buffs and things like that that you can preload or preset into your character like you can in AVA. So that, again, is probably not going to be the absolute most relevant thing. Though some of the areas and features in AVA will. In addition, AVA is just extremely fun if you like to do the competitive, player versus player, the alliance versus alliance matchups. So again, I think with that, it's a nice piece of content that is going to allow for players to do that on a consistent basis, where they'll get something else out of the game while they're waiting, right, for more of those later pieces of content, which we'll now touch on. So, as I mentioned before, I'm going to briefly touch on SVS, and then I'll talk about some of the rumored later game content that has kind of been whispered out there in the ether, if you will. So with SVS, right, again, for anyone here, and let me, just out of curiosity, let me get a raise of hands. Who here has participated in a server versus server or a kingdom versus kingdom before? Okay, so a few so far out of the people we have. So let me give a brief example of. I guess a brief summary of what it is. So, server versus server or kingdom versus kingdom essentially is just it's a feature in a game mode that more likely than not will put you or place your server up and match you up against a number of other servers in some kind of a battle royale free-for-all type mode. Now, in most cases, what would happen is that they may come out with a customized map that could be similar or different than the home server maps or the home server kingdoms that we play in for how the map layout is and everything. Meaning that they would come out with a new custom map specifically for this mode where you as players may get sent to that server and you'll compete against other servers. Now it can be anywhere from up to 4 to maybe up to 8 is what we maybe average could happen. And you're just battling it out against it's all your active players versus all other servers' active players. The reason why I think it's so fun and why I think SVS or KVKs are by far the most important game modes for these types of games is because that's really what it is. I mean, think of you playing any kind of MMO, RTS or MMORPG game. I mean, this is the genre of game that I feel as though for myself personally, I cannot get anywhere else, right? The fact that I can go in and you can organize a server, you can set up teams, you can have 50 to 100 people in a voice chat constantly coordinating and communicating, launching multiple offensives on a map. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm playing Total War or Civilization to an extent, right? But I'm doing it on a real-time basis with hundreds of players on at any given moment. That in and of itself I think is worth playing these types of games for, and even more importantly, worth preparing servers in good ways that are going to benefit you by the time SVS does come out. And the servers that take the time to better prepare now rather than later are only going to be in a much better position. Now, for the most part, there is no server that I know of at the moment that has what I feel has properly prepared in a multitude of ways that they're covering so far. There are some servers out there that I do think are making attempts at balancing, they're making attempts at doing certain things, but keep in mind, if you're in a server and it is before server, I think S35 or 34, which was when server mail was introduced into the game, right, you are at somewhat of a disadvantage. And I say that because let me start here. I say that because usually there's certain milestones in games on when newer servers are going to have advantages in certain areas. Given that the first 8 servers, which are beta servers, had different, this is kind of pre 1.0 before official launch, had certain benefits to being in them. Now it really comes out to how are you going to take advantage of certain features being in the game when it comes to you then deciding on what server you want to go into. Now, when you get big pieces of support tools such as server mail, it's really important to recognize the benefit there. Now, if you were in a server, let's say prior, even if it was before server mail was introduced, but it got introduced before you crowned a king or queen, when it came to post COR for your first one, then yes, you could still be in an arguably potentially good position. The reason why there's so much value on how server mail affects SVS and really just a plethora of other areas is because it gives you the ability to message every single player on your server. And the more players that you retain, the more that you can message, which means the more that you can inform, the more that you can educate, the more players you are going to give a reason to for them to stay and to keep playing in your server rather than going to another. So think about if you're even able to keep half of the player base. I mean, that's arguably 20 to 25,000 players that you are now able to send mails out to better prepare. Now, usually by the time COR finishes, it may not be that high. It might be somewhere around 10,000, maybe 15, give or take, by the time COR 1 finishes, depending on what's happened so far in your kingdom. But the potential to message and inform that many players is, it's amazing, right? And I can only imagine once they improve the current system for mailing, it's only going to be that much better. Which is why I think it's really important when you factor that going into how you are going to prepare for SVS. So anyways, let me talk a little bit about now some of the potential end game. Or I don't even know if I should say end game. Let me just say later game content. So with and this is just rumors, right, that we have right now, things that players have posted in the general chat and other chats on the IK Discord or other areas. Some things that have been rumored is that there's probably going to be, well, I don't even know what to say, I'm not going to say probably, because again, it's a rumor at this point. But what some people have alluded to is especially if you're in game right now, and then right after I say this, we'll definitely take some questions, is that if you open up the map and you look at how, in here, let me see if I can send a screenshot real quick just to give an example, because this would probably help a lot. So let me do this, and I'm going to post something in the voice channel chat for those that are interested. So okay, cool, here we go. So let me post this out. Okay, so if you look at the map, there is an area to the north that is called Frozen Wastes. Now, nothing has really happened in regards to announcements or anything that gives us any level of indication that this area is relevant on the map at all whatsoever. On the flip side, the North remembers. There you go. Yes. So, gosh, I'm sure the GOT references are going to be coming out, especially after after I posted that. So, anyways, the thing to keep in mind here is, again, with the rumors, some people have rumored that there could be a a later server-wide event that could be like a PvE style event that is going to be some kind of invasion from the Frozen Wastes onto the server. And this is something that a couple people have mentioned. Now, again, this has not been officially stated by the IK team, right? They haven't confirmed or denied anything publicly. But this is something that, at least back in the early beta servers, was rumored. That I heard rumors on. Again, even though it is unofficial, these are some things that some of the early beta players and even the alpha players had mentioned could be something that we might see later on. Now, whether or not it happens or not, I just think the idea is awesome. You know, in other Kingdom Builders I've played, they've never really had some kind of grand scale server-wide event that has affected all the players on the server in some way, right? Hopefully not in an extremely impactful way, but as far as in them being able to participate or contribute in something that's server or kingdom wide. I love that idea. And if that's something that comes out, that could be really cool. And potentially, at least the first for what I've seen. Right, zeroed by PvE, right? I mean, you know, it kind of gives me, I don't want to like sit here and dive into my anime fetish at all, but I mean, it kind of gives me like that Sword Art Online vibe. From season 1, where it's like they're just kind of fighting against everything, and you know, that, like I said, that to me just sounds really cool if they ended up doing something like that. Because again, you would almost assume that they have to do something, given that this big landmark area is in the game and nothing has been announced yet, right? Like, is it just for show? But if it's for show, why would they name it? If it was just for show, why would they have insignias on the walls? Why would there be shadows or things that pop up at random points that people have noticed, right? It really, and people are doing some deep dives on this stuff for people that are really into the lore and other areas. So, anyways, just something I wanted to briefly touch on because I thought it was really interesting. Let me go back to the hand raises now. I think Yoda had a question. So let me bring you on, Yoda, if you are still here. And at the same time, let me... Okay, unless Yoda took his thing off, then... And I'll read through voice channel chat here in just a moment. 45, awesome. Alright, let me see if someone had another question here. Alright, let me take a look at voice channel chat, and then we'll move on to the last topic. And then after we do the last topic, we'll open the floor up as well for any questions. Yeah, I love these special ruins that spawn after you hit 100%. Man, they give a lot of good rewards. Okay, I'm just gonna, there's a few more people typing, just in case if they have any questions in regard to anything I just talked about when it comes to AVA, SVS, or the rumored stuff. If there's gonna be an information, Yoda's gonna be too nice. There you go, Yoda. That's funny. Gather, what am I doing for territory? Yoda asked the question. Oh, here we go. Just curious. Are S1 to S8 transformed from beta servers to full servers? And will they be able to join SVS? Yes. So they will be able to. So the beta servers are they're technically, I guess they really are full servers. I just call them the beta servers because they were the first 8 servers that came out before S9. S9 came out when the game hit global release. So S9 was the first official server after they hit global release on January 28th of 2021. So, you know, the game still isn't even 6 months. It's not even 5 months old, right? And but the servers are normal. They're not like a special server or anything like that. That's just how I title them. When it comes to will they be able to participate in SVS, yes, they will. I mean, they've been able to participate in AVA already. So. I think I'm still donating. All right. Let me see here. Okay, so I think we are probably good then to move on. So we're going to touch on our last topic, and this one's probably going to be semi-short as well. And then after we do that, we'll open the floor up for just any and all questions. Doesn't really matter what. I just always like to kind of open up everything at the end. So let's go ahead and we'll finish off, or top everything off better yet, with the last topic. So we're just going to briefly touch on, right, the mindset of players after you've been playing in a server for a while, right? What should your kind of personal goals be? What should you be looking at when it comes to your, your playing style, what you want out of a server, right? What might you be feeling at this point? So, what I would say is some goals that I like to tell people to keep in mind is that when you are playing these types of games, it is important to realize that you are playing for something and to get to a certain point. The example I usually give is if you look at a game like World of Warcraft, right? Completely different genre. But the one thing you always hear people say in that game is that you have to get to max level before the game actually starts, right? You have to get to level 60, right, before you can start enjoying a lot more of what the game has to offer. Personally, I feel very connected to that line when it comes to playing in Kingdom Builders. Now, there are still things, of course, you can do before you hit level 40 or you get T5 troops. But for the most part, that really should be the number one goal that holds everyone's sanity and mental fortitude together for the long run. Is looking at that regardless of whatever else is going on in the server or certain events that come up, your one common denominator of a goal should be to max your account out. It should be to get level 40 buildings. It should be to get T5. It should be to get max academy tech, working for your alliance to get their tech to max, trying to get to VIP 15, trying to get to count level 2. Right? These are all things that you should be looking forward to via your daily progression. Right? And understanding that it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Right? The turtle won in the end, not the rabbit. And that's something just to keep in mind when you are playing these types of games, because if you come in with a good mindset, it will make everything you do on a daily basis that much easier. Rather than if you come into the game thinking, well, okay, this is a war game, I'm just going to fight all the time, I just want to do PvP, I just want to go and do whatever I want. You may find that in some servers you might meet some resistance with certain types of mindsets or lawless mindsets in that regard, where you may not be able to enjoy the game the way you want to play to the fullest extent, which means that you may then need to restart, you may then need to consider migrating out, right? And keep in mind, not every server is going to be the same. This is another really good thing to keep in, again, to just know. If you have not played in multiple servers, if you've not played in multiple different kingdoms, and more importantly, if you haven't played in multiple kingdoms or servers where you've been in those kingdoms or servers for, let's say, 6 to 12 months, where you could really see how certain things played out, how policies played out, how the direction and the decision of the top alliances or group of alliances or the number one alliance decided to take the server in, right, then what your experience is in Kingdom Builders is probably more limited than some others who have seen those things, which is why it's important. Why it is important to just know that new servers can play out different ways. Not every server is going to play out the same way, right? Even if you've come from another Kingdom Builder where you played in a server and you were there for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and that's the only server you've ever played in, so you're thinking to yourself, well, this must be the way that every other server plays. Trust me when I say it is not, and you're going to get different sometimes you might have similar end goals in some servers, but the way that you get there, the process in which you take, or the path in which you take, can vary, in addition to some end game or late game policies being different as well. And those may vary by a little bit or maybe by a lot. And that's why I say it's just good to keep that in mind, so you know what is more of a realistic expectation versus an unrealistic expectation. And again, it is for your mental sanity and your mental health while you play, which I think is really important. So with that being said, any questions there on kind of how to come into the game? What are some good things to keep in mind of, again, when it does come to your mental state on how you approach certain things? And again, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like. Otherwise, you can type or ask a question in the voice channel chat, and I'll wait maybe about a minute. And if we don't get anything, then we will open the floor up for any and all questions. Just before we round out. Oh gosh. It's going to be a frozen trend, I can see it. Here it comes. Well, that's definitely one way to not build a snowman, for sure. That's funny. Let's see. All right. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and open the floor up. So if you have any and all questions, doesn't matter what it is, please feel free to ask. So if you want to ask in voice channel chat, if you want to raise your hand and ask, again, if you are a current or existing member in the Discord, you're more than welcome to. That's actually a pretty good gif. Taco Tuesday. Yeah. That actually doesn't sound bad. I'd rather sacrifice. Oh my god, man, world chat is so funny. Yeah, man. Rematch, like, damn, this started. Alright, let me see here. You know who you want some. Yeah, man. I might have to, man. There's a really good, like, authentic taco stand that is, I think they just put a couple up around my area, so. My taco's not more nice. Yeah. It's chalupa. Damn, man. I don't know, really. All right, all right. Well, welcome for some of the. I think there's a few new people here. But again, guys, again, if you have a question, doesn't matter what it is. If it's anything in regards to anything we've talked about this week, any of the previous weeks, even if it's something unrelated, could be about jumpers, anything IK related. Feel free. Otherwise, we'll probably hang out a few more minutes, and then I will probably call it. But just wanted to give anyone and everyone an opportunity if they still wanted to try and ask a question, because again, we will be uploading the VOD. Let me see. Lindy Twin asked, I just heard the words special ruins. What are those? So, yes, those are special ruins that will pop once you have 100% completion on all 3 of the normal ruins in-game. So once you do 100% on level 1, 2, and 3, you'll then get special ruins that pop, which are... You could almost consider it to be like level 4. Think of it like level 4, level 3 to level 4 ruins. So it's just better rewards, and there's a bunch that are spread out on the map. Yeah, I don't know if I have any... I'm still waiting for some clues. Yeah, I haven't even gone around the map and did it. That's probably really what I should do, is... well, yeah, and the thing is, they just added this too. It was last update, so it is new content. And if you're someone who, especially if you're doing, a jumper or anything, I mean, it's great. I mean, you should be trying to hit, 100% on level 1, 2, and 3, while you're doing that. And then from there, you can start doing the special ruins, and it's just going to factor even more into what you get. I'm just a bum right now on my main. I did that for the level 1, 2, and 3 ruins on my main, where I just grinded that away. But the special ruins, I just haven't gone through and kind of did my book method, scanning through each district to try and find those, which I should do. And I know I should do, but it takes a lot of time. So I'll get to it when I can. That's my thought there. So, yeah. Ember, like I said, I'm not sure if you can or not. That's just my soft assumption, is that after you 100% the level 1, 2, and 3, maybe you could, I would assume you should be able to look around the map and they'll just be there, because when you go off of the clues, it takes you to something that's there. So even if you move away from it and you come back, you should still be able to see it. So I think the assumption should be that they will pop once that does. Once you 100% the level 1, 2, and 3s, and it's just a matter of you looking around the map. So, I don't know why they would make it a limited thing where it has to go off of the clues that pop. You're looking now and you don't see them without clues. Yeah, again, it could be. Like I said, I haven't looked myself, so I don't know. That's just my soft assumption based on how other things have worked out. Shadow, Mr. VIP. What's the too funny. That's too funny. Yeah, so it's good stuff. Yeah, I know we're gonna be doing our... Oh gosh, I know we're gonna be doing our Jumper Town Hall today. It's our first one for our group. Oh, man. Which I think we're doing that in about 16 minutes on my server. So it should be good stuff. Which I probably need to put a friendly reminder out about too. I think that would probably help. Let me see. Here we go. Our jumper projects /S36. Oops. Let me do this. Awesome. Alright, cool. Just had to put that out. Let's see. Oh, let me go back here. Oh, someone had a hand raised. Let's take a look. Alright, just a visitor. Yeah, if you're a visitor or new member, you're more than welcome to ask a question, but if you could just do it in the voice channel chat, that would be great. If you're an existing member, you're more than welcome to ask a question over voice. Alright, sorry, Taco said, what are you talking about? Oh, no, I was talking about, I was saying that for Shadow, because he had just joined. I never said my thoughts would be if there's new runes being added, would any of you find and disappear after you find them? I didn't expect you to know the answer to that. Oh, oh, gotcha. Hardest, let me see here. If we can ask anything, has anyone broken down best talk skills yet, like their tier rating? No, I'll be honest, I have not. I'm actually hoping to do that today. So I know a lot of people have been asking me to do a Tower of Knowledge breakdown video. I have started doing some of that work. But I'm hoping to actually put that video out either today or tomorrow. The thing is that when I put a video out like that, just like when I put my Immortal videos out, I like to do a lot of research. And one, because I think it's important that for myself as a content creator, one, I know what I'm talking about. Two, I have a good understanding of what I'm talking about. And then three, I feel comfortable enough to properly advise people. And I think when you have a good understanding of the game and you're putting out content that reflects that, I think more players are hopefully going to be more appreciative of that as well, right? Because you're not just, making some kind of a clickbait video by putting a title in that everyone wants to hear, right? Or people are excited to watch or to tune in. So I have started a little bit on talk. But again, I'm going to go... The thing I like to usually do with something like talk is I like to go through all the skills. I like to write everything down in a spreadsheet. I like to, then assess and go through Immortal's current skills, look at things like synergies, really be able to give players good information. So, yeah. I'll probably be doing a talk breakdown video. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe, like I said, if anything, it may come out tomorrow. Maybe today. We'll see. Broke down per expected DPS. Sorry, you said, can I message you? Then I recently broke down the damage ones. If you want, I can send the spreadsheet, but I didn't place any bless or attribute skills there. Sure, yeah. I mean, I had a guy that sent me something yesterday about some talk skills, and he was like, hey, just wanted to share this with you in case you want to use it for future videos. So yeah, if you want to, and if it's something I end up using, then I always give credit for anything that's shared with me. If it's something that factors in where I'm not just doing the due diligence myself, then sure, please feel free. Beatlook, sure, you're more than welcome to ask it in voice chat. Again, just because you're a new member to the server, and we just always kind of go off of new or visitors in a probation period, but you're more than welcome to ask on the voice chat, and I'm happy to answer, if I'm able to. So. What this is, yeah, right. Yeah, man, I always get so many messages when I take time to... Alright, let me just come back real quick. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think from last week's show, it's funny because even when we did week 3, I already anticipated some people, after I realized that new members could come in from having a public, from doing a public stage channel that could be found in the discovery section. It's pretty obvious that when you get new players that come in, there's always going to be a high chance of a visitor or just a new member that wants to come on voice and kind of do some kind of a trolling thing. So it's pretty easy to identify that if you are kind of looking out for it. So, and thankfully, when it happened in week 3, the moment that we brought on a new visitor, I already had the mouse over so I could move them back to audience the moment that there was any indication that they were going to say something. And when it happened, they immediately got moved, and then we just updated that policy. So any visitors or new members just kind of have to go through a probation period until they've been in the server for a while before they can do that. And even when unless I know you or you're someone who's asked a question before earnestly, I'll still always have the mouse hovered over moved to audience. So again, even if a new member or someone wants to try and troll, they might only ever get a second, if that, of trolling out before they're immediately moved to the audience. So it's it's a pretty easy fix, which is nice. Yeah. Well, it really wouldn't matter if someone stole an identity because they still have to talk, right? The whole point of trolling is that they want to say some verbal words, right? Whether they want to say something profane or they want to say something disgusting or they want to say something disrespectful, right? They still have to voice it no matter what. So I think it's just a good policy to have where you just always hover over the option to move them back to audience. So that way you're just always prepared for if and when something could happen. Yep. Just go to prepare. So anyways, I think that probably is going to be wrapping it up for us so far in our week 3 show. Again, I really want to thank anyone and everyone who did come out. If you're someone who asked a question, always appreciate any level of engagement and contribution along with the people that are still here in the voice. This kind of wraps up our 4-week, town, I guess our live show education that we ended up doing. We ended up, I really think, getting great turnouts for the amount of people that joined. I think the hopeful possibility of what we could be doing in future weeks is doing more of specific topical discussions. I think that is something that would probably draw out a little bit larger of a crowd, where we do things such as, maybe like one week we'll talk about, jumpers and, how to prep jumping accounts, how to, we'll talk about, if you're in a project, what are good things to do or look at. Maybe we'll do a week where we do tower knowledge skill breakdowns. Maybe we'll do a week where the topical discussion is talking about immortal compositions and matchups. Maybe we'll do a PvP topical discussion. Maybe we'll do a topical discussion on kill events. I think those things, because they're very specific topics, would probably have a good chance of drawing out larger crowds as well. So those are some things that we're thinking about, some things that some of the players that have been in some of our town halls and sessions have asked me about. And it's something that we may consider doing. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But again, all right, this kind of concludes. As I end, I do want to give a big shout out to not only Vita, Pia Pio, and the rest of the IK team, who was such an instrumental part in allowing for us and giving me the opportunity to use the platform they have here on the official Discord, because it has really just been an extreme enjoyment and an honor for me to be able to kind of come on and host and hopefully give a lot of players that have come through some good information, some good tips, some good practices on how to approach going into Infinity Kingdom in a lot of different ways and areas. So it's definitely been my pleasure for sure. And again, I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm going to have to get off because we have to get over to my S36 jumper meeting slash server conclusion, if you will. And again, so I appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope anyone and everyone, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, you have a good day, good afternoon, or good morning in that case. And take care, everyone.